Started. I'm pleased to introduce Lilia Efimova, who's been working as an intern with myself and Gina Vinolia, who's out this week. Lilia took on what I think is a challenging task. She came in, she had a little exposure to Microsoft as she had attended the Social Computing Group Symposium last spring, but basically she came in from outside to do a study of the use of a leading-edge technology here within the company, so without knowing a whole lot about the company, and really hit the ground running, has collected a lot of data, analyzed a lot of data, interviewed, as she'll say, interviewed 39 people at some length, ranging from the active weblog community to vice presidents to get their views of it. She'll say more about it, but she's collected all of this data. She's been analyzing it right up until we had to sort of stop about 5 minutes ago to come down and here present it. You're definitely getting this the first cut of this of the work that she's been doing here.
Yeah. So probably have to say that this is first results, and there is still more data to analyze. But given that I'm finishing my internship here tomorrow, we thought that it would be really great to share what we've got so far and to get feedback of people. So I'll just tell a little story. Over the weekend, I went driving to Olympic Peninsula, and then I was in a small town, Port Gamble, and I went in a small bookstore. And in that small bookstore, it was one shelf with kind of computer-related books. And this is actually a screenshot that I did on that shelf. So it was like mainly, kind of Microsoft-related books, and in between, it was this book edited by Rebecca Blood, We've Got Blog. And I thought that it was pretty kind of funny and saying a lot. Like between all other things, blogging is somewhere in between. So just a bit of broad thing why we're getting into this whole thing. This is a couple of slides from Gartner, and they talk about the hype cycle. So that new technologies come and go, and some of them eventually reach plateau where they become productive and used in a company. So as a lot of technologies, like for example, instant messaging that started like out there with young people and students, and then eventually moving into corporate world. So the question is if blogging is moving there and what shape it would take. And what Microsoft could do about that as a company. So the interesting thing, so the corporate blogging, according to Gartner, is over here, and it's white, which says that less than 2 years it will reach productive stage where it will become mainstream in a corporate uses. So I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. Of course, there's a predictions, and we don't know exactly what would happen, but it's definitely good for Microsoft to know, what could be possible scenarios and possible issues, so the company is prepared. And this is just another one of like different options that corporate blogs could take from Deutsche Bank. But I'm going directly into what we did. So when we started this study, we had a set of pretty broad questions trying to understand where and how and why Microsoft people blogs, how personal weblogs are in the mix between personal and work-related, what happens when blogging becomes part of your work, what are business implications of blogging, and also how different are different types of blogs. For example, external weblogs, which are pretty big at Microsoft, but also internal weblogs, group weblogs, or weblogs in other languages, weblogs by people outside Redmond. I actually went through a few weblogs by Chinese people, which of course I couldn't make any sense because they were in Chinese. So, and what implications, what could be done to, make blogging more effective, or, use it in a company in a better way. So we did a few things. The main thing, what I did together with Jonathan for part of interviews, we interviewed bloggers. And I have to say that we use very broad definition of who blogger is. So we talked with people, not necessarily blogging on Microsoft servers or not necessarily blogging about work-related stuff. And I kind of went through all kind of tricks to find a group of people as diverse as possible, which of course probably not really objective, but still we try to accommodate for like different shapes and different types of people, and of course a variety of demographics and places in the organization. So we also talk with people involved in blogging in Microsoft. So we talk with people supporting internal and external blogs, and I'm very thankful to them for providing information and help. Teams working on Amazon Spaces and SharePoint. We talk with lawyers and PR people, and 2 VPs as well. Next to that, I kind of really bloated my RSS subscription list. So I was reading a lot of Microsoft weblogs, some of them regularly, a lot of them just browsing through. So I did all the kind of detective work of figure out, who's behind that blog, which are interesting blogs, because you can observe, you can see in a weblog that it's used in an interesting way. Distribution list, a few meetings, and I was kind of socializing with bloggers as much as I could. Next to that, there were 3 surveys done by Jonathan and Gina over 16 months. And we include some results of those surveys in this presentation, not everything. So, and each of them was sent to around 1,000 people randomly selected from a broad list of Microsoft employees, so it's FTEs and Dash employees. And all of them, they had around 40% response rate, which is pretty good. An important thing about surveys that they didn't mention the word weblog in the introduction. So it was, I think, just about communication. And one of the first questions after demographic was, do you know what a weblog is? And then a few questions more. And so it's kind of, we hope that it's a bit objective data. So, talking about blogging at Microsoft, so what is the bigger picture? And probably people who blog, they already know that, but I just want to kind of go at a high level through that. And please correct me if I'm wrong, because, I mean, it's just 10 weeks over here. So the first thing that there is kind of no policy Microsoft. So what the kind of general say is that you cannot really mandate everything what you can block or cannot block, and blogging is just another form of communication, so which should not require any specific, like set of very specific guidelines and so on. So the general policies, don't be stupid. So you kind of supposed to exercise your judgment and to know what you can talk with, like with your friends, with meeting customers and so on. So, and there are, of course, few questions that understanding the nature of a medium because it's recording and it's public and so on. But the general idea that, like, be smart. Blogging also, over the last few years, got pretty much support from the top management of the company. Like Bill Gates spoke about blogging in general, I think a year and a half ago. Steve Ballmer talked recently, Eric Rudder. And so, like, a lot of people really in the top of the company are supportive, or at least openly talk about blogging. And there is also kind of movement towards more transparency of the company and opening up and connecting with customers. And in some divisions, it goes down to level of specific commitments that people kind of commit that they spend like a couple of hours interacting with customers, even if it's not direct part of their job. And also, when we talk with vice presidents, both of them, they had different opinions, but they talk about blogging, that it's just one more communication channel. It's increasingly important communication channel, but it's just a way to communicate with the outside world and also internally. What was a bit surprising for me as an outsider who didn't know how things are in a company, when I came and we started to talk, when we were surprised to find out how much understanding of blogging we found between LCA people and also PR people of Baguette. And of course, they were talking about risks, but they were saying, like we're a big company, we have those risks anyway. And they were definitely seeing a lot of benefits of blogging and kind of ready to work through that. And what they also, in both cases, both kind of organizations, they try to provide integrated support. So like in Wagner Angstrom, they say that they don't have one particular person responsible for like blogging support of Microsoft, that it should be like all people in their team should be able to deal with blogs and know how blogs could be part of bigger PR strategy. So, and for me, that was kind of surprising how much of understanding was there already. Talking about infrastructure, there are two servers, kind of main servers that where Microsoft Weblogs are, external Weblogs are hosted, and these are, the hosting is outsourced, but all the support is internally, and Betsy Aoki is, unfortunately, I think she's still in Australia traveling, does a lot of work to kind of support blogging there. There is blog portal which aims on registering all the weblogs and where you can search by topic what are weblogs and posts on specific topics. Then there is internal blog server on HTTP blogs. There are, I think, 4. There are a few distribution lists discussing various blogging issues. And there is a number of intranet resources explaining, how to start, what is a blogging, and pointing to all those things. So this is kind of a bigger picture. So now interesting things. So this is data from 3 surveys. And this is percentages of people who responded to the survey, and we kind of can expect that it's probably similar percentage of people who work for the company. So basically, what you can see now that 80% of people in Microsoft are familiar what weblog is, so they answered yes in the question that I know what a weblog is. Then it was a question, what here is indicated as read, but it actually was like, have you read weblogs, like at least once? So, and you can see that pretty big number, like over 60% actually read weblogs. But we thought that, okay, let's look into more detail. And we also look, another question was about how many weblogs do you read regularly. 6-8% read at least one weblog regularly. So there is this big number of people who just read weblogs, once in a while when they come to resources. But at least they know what weblogs are and they read them. What is really surprising is actually number of people who write weblogs. And also there's 2 numbers. So this number of people who created at least one weblog. And this one number of people who have at least one weblog active. And what you probably could expect that a lot of people try it out and then don't blog. But actually, the difference is 3%. So actually 12% of Microsoft people, according to this survey, maintain at least one active weblog, which is a pretty interesting number.
So read means read and or contribute comments, and write means to publish?
Read means just read weblogs. Like I don't have numbers about commenting. So writing means publishing. So they contribute to weblog themselves as an author, either by themselves or part of a group, but not contribution in a comment. So, where are all the bloggers?
So
Yeah.
active is defined as to have an active. Is that at least one
Currently has
posting
an
a week?
active
Or
weblog.
Yeah, they defined, so the question was, I think, how many weblogs do you actively contribute now? And actively contribute, I think it was not defined like, it didn't have specific definition because, of course, some people would say actively is like last week and some people would say actively last month or like, yeah.
including personal?
Yeah. So these are numbers about weblogs in general.
So it could be on Blogger or something else.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to.
To translate the percentage number, that means over 10,000 people in the company are actively blogging now.
Yeah, it's 10,000 if you take extended FTEs and Dash employees. I'll go to. So where are the bloggers? The first one that usually like everyone knows and speaks about is bloggers at MSDN and TechNet servers, which is around just a bit more than 2,000 according to last statistics. Then next to that, there is internal server which has, as of today in the morning, 835 weblogs, which is surprising for some people because they kind of not aware that there is so much weblogs over there. Of course, in both cases, if you go there, you see that a lot of those weblogs are not active. But it's just numbers of, at least number of weblogs created. So then there are a few self-hosted intranet servers, which we don't know how many are there. I definitely talked with a few people who say I host something or there is a weblog server in my team internally, but we don't know how many are those in a company. So then there are blog, kind of officially supported blog servers in other countries, and I at least discovered two, the one in France and the one in the Netherlands, so they kind of host it in official servers. So it's kind of official of the same kind of level as MSDN and TechNet. Then there are, of course, MSN Spaces, so Microsoft service for external, like for general customers, but there are a lot of Microsoft bloggers who blog there as well. So, and then there are Microsoft-hosted or supported initiatives, the Spoke, which aims on younger kind of students or people interested in technology, Wallop, which is research project, which has a lot of blogs inside. There are some weblogs on God.net servers, and so on. So those are somehow, Microsoft has something to do with those. So, and then of course there are own servers and externally hosted weblogs, and we don't know how many were. So basically the only numbers that we know for sure it's internal and MSDN and TechNet. And I think like in totally on these two servers, because they had numbers, it was not that many, it was around 30 something in total. What is interesting that a Microsoft tool that's supposed to register weblogs, I didn't have the exact data, but I think that the one number that I got, it was 700 something weblogs, both Microsoft hosted and external are registered on Microsoft server. But if you look at the survey, and if you look only at FTEs, so not Dash employees, then the estimated number that it should be around 7,000 people blogging. So the big question, where are those people and what they're blogging about? Because basically nobody knows, and it's kind of very distributed thing.
Because some of them are group blogs, team blogs.
Yeah.
You'll get.
Yeah, it may be less. Definitely, it may be less blogs, but also there are people who have many weblogs. So, what do those people blog about? And this is the data from a last survey, and the kind of all graphs that I would have now. They're from a last survey in June. So, this is a number of people who answered. Like what are you blogging about according to those topics, like from only on this topic mostly to not at all. So what is interesting that it seems that most popular blogging areas are actually blogging about daily life and hobbies. Yeah.
Is that from which of the three surveys?
Last one.
The last one. And what's the N on that?
It was sent out to 1,000 people picked randomly.
Sure,
And we got a little over 400.
So of those 400, most of them responded about blogging, or is it like there were 200 on the survey that were blogging?
Oh.
Yeah, like the end for this.
It was no. It was from
15%. 15% are blogging. So
Okay.
of the 400, you had
60.
Okay, so this are numbers. Yeah, you're right. I have a number. I think it's like 200. It's 80% basically. So it's from 400 is like whatever 250. No more. Yeah, 250. Free. Whatever. Doesn't matter. So around 300 people. So this is from people who know what a weblog is, obviously, and you're right, I should put the number over there.
So this is not what they're blogging, this is including what they read, what they're
Yeah.
interested in.
So these are people who know what a weblog is. basically, who know what a weblog is, and they may read weblog, may write weblog, so it's like the whole group of people. And we'll have breakout a bit later on like those who read and who don't read. So yeah, as I said, most of people seem to blog not about work-related stuff, about daily life, hobbies, or interesting things. So these are only two groups that you can kind of say that probably those are work-related, which probably explains why Microsoft doesn't know, or like it's not known where all the bloggers are, because I can imagine if someone has a personal diary for their family, they kind of don't feel obliged to notify their managers. So it's like really private thing. So, I would say that it's probably safe to assume that most of Microsoft people who blog actually blog about personal things which are not work-related. So, but we're interested in those who kind of touch work in whatever sense, what happens with them. So talking about where to blog and also how people make choices between all these different spaces where to start a weblog, this is some insights that we've got from interviews. And it wasn't a question where we asked explicitly, but those things that came up in a conversation when people were telling how they started blogging and why they started in one or another place. So blogging at Microsoft servers, MSDN or TechNet is definitely very easy to start, or relatively easy to start. Sometimes you have to wait till it's registered and so on. But the technology is there, and you have Microsoft affiliation, and it's also very good for beginners because you have visibility, because all the recent posts on the homepage. So you immediately get some traffic, and people can discover you, which is obviously very difficult if you start in your own server somewhere. But obviously, for a lot of people, they're not comfortable blogging on their server. The first thing, obviously, they say, what if I want to blog about personal things, or mix of work-related stuff and personal things, and I want to do it in one place. I don't feel like MSDN, for example, is appropriate. There are questions related to blogging in other languages. I was talking with someone in Russia who started actually whole Russian server, then god.net.ru, and he said, I didn't know that you can blog in Russian at MSDN. And I talked with another person who is Brazilian, and he said, yeah, you actually can blog there in Portuguese, but the titles, they do not support the right encoding of symbols and so on. So, and of course, there are bloggers who say, I want to blog about work-related stuff, but they're not technology-related. Like I was talking about someone who was in marketing, and he thought that probably it's not really appropriate to blog on MSDN or TechNet because these are servers which are kind of oriented to more technical audiences. So what people do if they kind of decide not to blog on MSDN or TechNet, a lot of people choose MSN Spaces. Yeah, I should add MSN Spaces. At first, definitely, it seems to be between people who work for MSN, it's a kind of matter of pride to blog at MSN Spaces, even if it's maybe look less professional, but it's it's a product of their group. So I think there is definitely kind of a bit of social pressure or pride to blog there, but also a lot of Microsoft people, at least now, who want to start blogging in a more personal, or for example, interns who are not allowed to blog on MSDN, they kind of say, you can go to MSN Spaces. And for many people, they actually would prefer choosing Microsoft product. They say, I work here, I don't want to kind of contribute to product of competitors. Then, as I say, there are servers in the local, in the countries, and there they try to connect with the local community. And this is the reason why they want to blog locally. In one case, in a case of Russia, they have server blogs god.net.ru, and Microsoft people in Russia, they actually encourage to blog there. And the main reason, because on that server, they can blog, but also external developers could blog, and they want to have all these weblogs in one space because they want kind of to strengthen the connection. And it also has all the infrastructure for blogging in Russian and so on. So, and of course there are a lot of people who just go for their own server or for externally hosted weblogs just because they want more control, especially in the case of their own server. They can do whatever they want. They also, sometimes they want clear ownership of, that it's clear that, I do it at my free time, and it's like, I wrote that, and it's not on Microsoft server. And in some cases, they want to be anonymous. Like one of our probably most famous Microsoft anonymous weblog is Mini Microsoft, which is, like, for me, was a great source of kind of inspiration and understanding of difficult things in a corporate culture, next to good things. So, and in some cases, people don't want strong affiliation with Microsoft. And it's not necessary because they want to be anonymous. But in some cases, they say that if you blog and a Microsoft name, like Microsoft stands next to your name, you get all the attention just because you work for Microsoft. And like everything what you say, it kind of judged not only through, like how interesting and good it is what you say, but also, it's Microsoft guy or girl who says that. So, and we talked with a couple of people who blog pretty heavily on like work-related and professional issues and also provide information for the community, but they just don't want to be affiliated because they think that it creates more trouble. Talking about why people blog, and this is, of course, I say that we talk with a few people who, for example, had internal weblogs only, but also for the sake of time, I try to put here motivations, like why people blog, mainly for those who write work-related weblogs or like somehow more or less touching professional issues. So one of the very strong things, and the one that probably were, like for me, this was how my contact with Microsoft Weblog started, is this whole kind of cry that, we want to show the human face of the company and it's not evil empire. And before coming here, I thought that it was kind of, like corporate, like PR movement. So let's show that we're not evil. But when I started to talk to people, I realized pretty fast that it has a lot of impact at the personal level when you just have kind of explain your, hacker friends that you work for a company which, sometimes does quite questionable things. And also in many cases, you're like really proud and you really believe in, in your work and stuff that you do, and you really care about customers. But there is this public image that you personally also have to deal with also in your own social context. And I could imagine that for a lot of people, they really want to kind of to show that there are real people working here and that these people care about customers and products and work hard to solve problems, and it's not always possible. So this is definitely strong motivation for a lot of people. Next to that, there is passion for their own work and stuff that they do and just like sharing and writing. And few people actually say that they used to write before, or they kind of wanted to be a writer, or they would like to be a writer in the future, or they just enjoy writing. So there is this also kind of outward facing, I would say, self-expression. Next to that, and it's also something what I thought that it was kind of corporate thing, you should connect and interact with customers. But again, I saw with a lot of bloggers that they actually do care about customers and they do enjoy communicating and helping customers and also getting feedback on the work that they do. Like, for example, helping to solve specific problems when they kind of post in their weblog tips and tricks. Definitely getting feedback and ideas on their products. And we've heard a few very interesting stories when a kind of customer, like customers were sharing stories about how they use product, which actually inspired a lot of users that developers didn't think about. Telling stories behind products and decisions made. And I think that's very interesting part because it's very, sometimes people complain and say, this is like stupid feature or like it doesn't do good things. And sometimes there are really good reasons why it was done that way. So explaining those reasons actually help to get people who use product, let's say, less irritated and more happy and kind of more understanding about, why things are that way. So, and also someone talked that, I actually really would like to kind of know what people think about product and so on, but in a cycle, I only get to talk to customers when the product ships. And for me, blogging is actually provides opportunity to do it now without waiting that long. So next to that, what people definitely feel like doing is providing information. One thing is making clear where Microsoft stands in relation to a particular issue. And sometimes it's like smaller things related to details that would not be kind of easily provided in public, in the press releases and so on. Correcting wrong information, faster way to publish things. Yeah.
Could you give me an example of what you mean by making a detail that couldn't be?
For example, like the one example I could think about is I talked with someone doing, you probably could identify person easily, doing marketing for Xbox team. And he was telling that they have press releases, but sometimes they won't kind of comment like semi-officially what is Microsoft, or like what is their team position on specific issues. And those are too small for a press release. So it's like just kind of more like where we stay, what do we think about this or that. So, and definitely a lot of people have that not only for a product, like I want to kind of show Microsoft position, but also just to share their own opinion. Like what do they think about Google Chat, for example. So I really enjoyed the few days back when Google Chat came out. There is really nice weblog by a person who works on MSN Messenger. And she wrote like really nice, kind of funny story, like MSN Messenger talking to Google Chat and welcoming Google Chat in instant messaging space. Things like that. So, and also some people were saying that for them, blogging is one way to just provide information faster and have less gatekeepers. I think one estimation that I had that publishing an article on I don't remember, like publishing an article, for example, explaining whatever particular technology, it costs around $300 and like takes time, and there is editorial process. So if you want to make sure that people get answer on the questions that they have, also for selfish reasons that they stop bothering you or whatever, it's just much faster. So, and for quite some people, blogging is related to their purposes that they have in their work. For example, we talked with someone who's a consultant, and he said that his goal is to accelerate the use and adoption of Microsoft tools. And for him, blogging about tools and explaining how they could be used, it actually serves his purpose of his work. Or like getting feedback, advertise events that people organized, or promote Microsoft jobs.
If I could just add one point there, the sort of an interesting thing is that the faster way to publish on official channels, fewer gatekeepers. Now we talked to the gatekeepers, and of course they do that as people, the LCA and WAG, and they see attention there, but they also realize that correcting wrong information is something you have to do quickly or it's too late. And so they're very much aware that there are these benefits as well as the fact that there are these, these sort of risks. And so it's very interesting how those fit together.
If you feel like interrupting, please interrupt, and then I also can talk a bit less.
Has there been any studies that you're aware of that actually kind of measure the risks versus benefits of blogging? I mean, it's been an ongoing debate on a lot of the aliases where people try and correct maybe the corporate point of view, and they either put out information that's valuable or information that's incorrect sometimes.
I will talk a bit about that at the end, but I mean, the short answer that I don't know good studies on that, but it's definitely an issue. So talking about the facts, so we were asking people, so since you started blogging, what kind of your experiences, what changed, and so on. So these are things that people experience over period when they were blogging. A lot of people, or probably we also talk to more active bloggers. So if you take the whole spectrum, we try to talk to these not very active, but we still were on more like active side. So they find it fun and rewarding. And okay, and then they have error over there. So, but basically they enjoy like helping or to know, to get feedback from customers and also to be known, because someone saying, it has this a bit of kind of egocentric thing that it's like nice when people say nice things about what you wrote and about you, and you kind of get known. And of course, not everyone enjoys that, but it seems that a lot of bloggers do enjoy that. So things, as I said, related to customer connections. So one of the strong examples that it's probably difficult to measure how blogging by Microsoft people changes the impressions that customers have for Microsoft. I mean, it's probably a very difficult thing to measure. I could tell my own story, how for me reading Weblogs by Microsoft people actually changed image of the company that I had. But probably one of indicators is to look at the people who get hired but who, like new hires who actually read Weblogs of Microsoft people. And it definitely becomes recruiting tool, kind of showing what is life inside Microsoft and how it is, and like changing the image, at least for this part of, you can say, customers in a sense. I know, yeah.
Is it formally used by recruiters?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's pretty big, at least in some part of recruitment. So, and also...
You might mention Steve Sinofsky has a...
Yeah. Steve Sinofsky started...
is primarily focused on recruiting.
For Office. Yeah.
Right.
And also, I've heard stories from people, it's also not only kind of changes the image of the company in general, but also changes image of specific groups. Like I've heard stories of people who are saying, we've got like new intern, a new hire, and they came to me and they say, I read your weblog, and that was the reason why I went to this group and not that group. So it definitely influences decisions that people make. But as I said, at this moment, it's very difficult to get really objective measures, but at least there is a lot of anecdotal evidence of that. So as I said, it kind of gives products some faces, so people know who is behind that and what they're doing and what are the stories, and provides a communication about for teams working in a product. And it's also helped people outside to discover resources, since weblogs are more kind of interlinked, and Google loves weblogs. Unfortunately, Amazon Search doesn't love weblogs as much as Google. So, but I mean, anyway, search engines, they kind of favor weblogs. So people can actually find resources sometimes much faster than looking at Microsoft servers, where there is some work put into that, just because of how blogging works. So another interesting thing, what seemed to happen, especially with external weblogs, that they accelerate the need for change. So probably the strongest example of that is Robert Scoble, who said that he could go internally and try to impact some changes and nothing happens. But then if he writes about the same thing in his weblog, then everyone internally listens, because it's in public and it's complaining in public, and it kind of more pressure to address it. But it also happens in like much smaller scale. I've had a story of someone working on a product, and he does usability studies, and the kind of team for whom he did usability study did not believe that the problems were really that big. And the fact that he wrote about that in his weblog, and discussion that happened in his weblog, actually convinced his team members that they should listen to what he was saying and change the interface. Another interesting thing, and this is not for all people, but it seems for some bloggers, weblog becomes as a space to document and draft and share ideas and materials that they have. So they talk that they use it as personal archive, or like someone said, I like write in my weblog like specific settings that I did for like particular technology, because like in a few months I just don't remember how I did that, so I can go back and search. They also do it for others, so they can send link instead of answering frequently asked questions. Go back and find something for bookmark, or just go back for memories and kind of remember what you did last month and so on. So few people say that they reuse content in their weblog for reports or articles on the portal they write, or they're being asked to by other people to reuse their content. And I think at least 3 people we were talking with, they were thinking about writing books based on what they have in their weblog, which of course raises interesting copyright ownership issues that I will touch hopefully in the beginning, at the end. And also a couple of people, and these refer mainly to internal weblogs, they say that once they started to write weblog, they stopped about spamming people by email with ideas and so on. They just know that it's somewhere where others could access it. So another interesting part is knowledge sharing within company. And something what I find really, really interesting, and it's a stories that we also heard from quite a few people. They say, the fact that I write weblog externally actually helped me to find internal people working on a similar thing. So it's a kind of, like internal communication in public, but somehow it helps people to discover, it's a huge company, to discover like-minded people in other groups and other teams. And definitely in many cases it can result in some work improvements, or like joint work and so on. And another thing is that because things that are documented in the weblogs, also tips and tricks about technology, they're useful not only for customers, they're also useful for other people in Microsoft, who, for example, internal customers who use the same technology, who work on that. So it's actually accelerate learning processes about technology and how things go. And of course, blogging has impact on the work of people. So far, we know about one incident of someone being fired. So it was, I think, a consultant, a temporary person posting photos of Apple computers in his weblog. And so it was a big story. The interesting thing, we've got comment, I think it was from LCA people. They say probably if it would happen now, we wouldn't fire the person. That I find it interesting. So, and there were quite a few people, especially those who started, who were like early adopters of blogging, who had to kind of go through difficult conversations with their managers and find what are the boundaries, how much they could blog or couldn't blog, and so on. For people who are into blogging in a more or less regular basis, it takes time, so it's definitely involves some commitment of time, and either you find out how you do it as part of your work, if you can really embed it in your work, or you spend your own time. And not everyone is ready to do that. And a few people who are like most well-known bloggers actually complain about email overload. So they say, now this product that I'm working got the face on it and the email address on it, and it happened to be my email address. And I'm not I'm interested and passionate about that, but I'm not the only one. But people send me emails with complaints and so on. So for especially more high-profile bloggers, they have to deal with this issue and kind of find out tricks how to avoid that. Couple of people we talked with, they talk that for them blogging is actually resulted in improved job security. They say, like now because of my blogging, I also get invited to speak externally, and I know what I'm worth. And I also know that, especially for those a bit higher profile, they say, I know that if whatever thing happens, it's not that easy to fire me because it will be visible in a weblog and will have impact on the company. So which which I kind of find interesting, in fact. So, and another interesting thing is few people say that because they were blogging, people around them or their managers recognize their kind of personal passions, personal interests, and actually they could change responsibilities or change job within the company and get additional responsibilities to work on the things that they were passionate about, like do type of work that they want to do that probably like their managers didn't know that they're good in that. I just feel like I'm talking all the time, which is true. Okay, I have some more green things. This is again coming back to the survey, and this is questions we ask in general about attitudes towards blogging. And this is what people think, that blogging is useful for personal pursuits, that if blogging is fun, blogs are useful for communicating within customers, and blogs are useful for communicating within an organization. And the numbers over there, it's a scale from not at all to kind of in between to agree and strongly agree. So this is the part where people strongly agree. And this scale, so these are people who are aware of what weblogs are, but they don't read weblogs. These are people who read weblogs, and it's a general category, it's not regular readers. And these are people who write weblogs. And what is interesting to see that actually the more you get involved into blogging, the more you believe that it's useful and fun for personal and kind of business reasons. And of course, we don't know what are the cause and effect relations. If once you get involved, you find out that they're so good, or because you believe that they're so good, you get involved. But still, the connection is there. And also, what you can see that for all categories, the kind of personal things, the fun and useful for personal reasons, they're pretty high. But for business users, you can see for people who know what weblogs are but don't read them, they're not really convinced that weblogs are used either for external or internal communication. Which brings me to the question of internal and external weblogs. And I probably have to tell a little bit background behind that, because the reason I got involved into blogging and this study, I'm actually looking originally for weblog use in the context of knowledge sharing, which is pretty much about internal communication. And I also know that in some other companies, for example, in IBM, at least the rumors are that they have around 1,500 internal weblogs, and they don't have that much external weblogs. And in Microsoft, the picture seems to be totally the opposite. External weblogs and customer connections are big, and internal weblogs are not that big. And a lot of people, they have like mixed opinions about those. So this was one of the things one of the issues that we wanted to look what is there happening with internal weblogs, what people think, and what potentially the value could be. So the first thing, that internal weblogs are not supported officially. There is server, but if you go to the server page, it says that it runs by volunteer, and like volunteers provide infrastructure and everything. So it's like purely goodwill of some people in the company. So there is no funds, no budget. So it's not officially supported. Also, many people that we talk to, they don't see much value of internal weblogs, or they don't read or write internal weblogs. So they say, yeah, I don't really see it, kind of doesn't help, with customers and so on. So it seems that for kind of at least some people in the organization, they don't really see the value. From another side, there are others who believe that internal blogging has value, or enough to support servers, for example. And I would say it's not that small, given that there are 800 internal weblogs created. It's a pretty big number. So these are some numbers from the last survey, and this time I have numbers there next to percentages. So it's a number of people reading and writing weblogs. So these people the dark green people who like read or write only external weblogs. There is a small light green, those who read or write only internal weblogs, and there's people who do both. So we had a couple of surprising things over there. The one was that finding out how many people that those people who actually engaged into internal blogging, they also engaged into external blogging. So those things seems to be connected. Also, the numbers are not very big to really look for, hard-proven connection. And also, like in total, if you look at number of people who read internal weblogs, it's around 25%. So there is some audience and some readership over there. Another interesting thing, what we found out, and here I'm going to go back to these opinions that people had about blogging. So what we did, we just took these two categories about internal and external blogging, and we took blog readers, so people who read weblogs. So this is total, so all people who read weblogs and how they judge how much blogs are useful for internal and external communication. Those are people who read only external weblogs, and those who read either both or internal only. The interesting thing, what you see, that for kind of how they think about usefulness of weblogs for external communication is more or less the same. But there is quite some difference about opinions about use of weblogs for internal communication. And it seems to be, again, the same pattern that people who involved more into that, they have high opinion about that. And again, we don't know what it cause and effect, but it's kind of interesting thing to look into in more detail.
Yeah, we don't know about cause and effect, but we do know that the people who do focus on internal weblogs don't conclude that it's useless. They definitely think that it is useful. So that's
at least those people who blog who at least read internal weblogs, they find some value, and they find more value in those than those who don't read them. Talking about internal weblogs, we talked with a few people who blog internally, and just kind of few highlights. Some interesting uses of internal weblogs. So there were a couple of cases where internal weblogs were used to document work and insights and specific studies done, or like available resources that the person was working that were resources, also like SharePoint resources intended for like his peers. So Weblog was a space to kind of document and publicize those. What was interesting, in both cases, they had email notification once in a while to say, okay, there is new stuff there in a weblog, and kind of to draw attention of people to their internal weblog. In another case, internal weblog, it was a space to collect materials that go into email newsletters. So there is this email connection as well. But in this case, the newsletter wasn't connecting that much back to the weblog. And I also talked with a team who used weblogs to just write progress reports, like weekly updates, who did what. And they find it a much better tool than doing the same thing by email, because they could, like go back and see what everyone did in like so-and-so months, and that it's much easier to find things back than, for example, searching in Outlook.
Lilia?
Yeah.
Quick question. The internal blogging space to collect materials are going into email newsletter. Was that programmatic?
No. Manual. Which is, of course, potential for features. I mean, you could do that in automatic, or at least make it a bit easier. So, so talking about barriers, why there are not that many internal weblogs there, I think the first question that for many people it's not clear what is the value. And what we probably could suspect that before they start to experiment or see many others who experiment, it's difficult to kind of figure out what exactly the value could be. So it's really like figuring out what the uses of the tool could be. The second thing, what people were talking about, is the lack of stable infrastructure, because even when I was here, when I tried to get people for interviews who blog internally, internal server, it was like down for like, 4 out of 5 days a week. And obviously it's very difficult if you cannot rely on technology to be there. It's obviously a barrier to do something useful with it. Another thing what a lot of people commented on, it was it's not exactly clear where weblogs fit between email use and distribution list from one side and SharePoint on another side. So they say, like we have email culture here and people email and there are great distribution lists. And from another side, if you want documents and static content, you can do it in a SharePoint. And of course, those who blog internally, they say, like distribution lists are not archived, it's difficult to find, and in some cases, I have something what could be interesting for other people, but I don't want to spam distribution lists, for example. And also talking about SharePoint, they say, like there is no notification there, or it's like, people didn't go, it's more difficult to search, or so it seems that there is some kind of spot in between, but still for a lot of people, potential users of weblogs is somehow covered by email and SharePoint. A couple of people say something, if I have something what I can share internally, like something useful for like all Microsoft people, then it's probably something not that secret, and I can also do it in external weblog, and then it also would add much more value because then customers could use that as well. So it's also finding exactly what type of content and materials and writing you can put in internal weblogs, which from one side would kind of be okay for the broad distribution internally, and from another side it would be still not public enough to not to do it externally. And a couple of people also say that one of the issues is access to internal weblogs when they're on the move, like especially for consultants. They find out that for them it could be a useful tool to kind of like reuse and connect with internal resources. But in many cases, when they're on the site, they just cannot access or they cannot browse into the network. So it's definitely an issue. Any questions about internal blogs? Yeah. Okay. Another interesting thing we talked about is something what we call product blogs. And this is kind of very broad definition. So it's when weblog, it's kind of get associated with specific product and not that much with a person. So there are we try to draw some distinctions here. So if you talk about product weblogs, you can talk about team blogging or specific person blogging, and doing that really informal or in a kind of semi-formal space, not really product website, but kind of official, let's say MSN search weblog, which kind of official. So interesting things what we found out that this is probably how it started. So first, it were some people informally blogging about things they care about. And it happens that some people are really experts in specific products. And they happen to care about those specific products. So what happens over time that their name got linked to the product itself. So they kind of get a representation of, like product weblog. It's, for example, like Chris Pratley kind of connected. He's like OneNote blogger. So, and of course, there are all kind of issues there, because what happens if this blogger decides to change job and go for another team? Then kind of people outside know that this is like OneNote weblog. They don't associate it that much with the name. They associate it with the product, so there is kind of value over there. So, and also the weblog starts to be perceived in a bit more official way. So it's like product blog. So the person has less freedom to write about things he or she wants to write. Another group, what we found out, and
Perceived freedom.
okay, perceived freedom. Another group of weblogs, which I think is growing, what we found out is product weblogs, which are usually team blogs. A great example, like MSN Spaces, Internet Explorer, Virtual Earth recent weblogs. So there are quite a lot of weblogs that usually written by a group of people, and they kind of semi-formal in a sense, so they present a particular product. So, and those, obviously, they don't have all those issues over there, so they kind of more official, and they do not have the strong association that this person is responsible for that product. What we also seen is a couple of cases where there is only one person between more kind of formal product weblog. And one of the things, in one case, it was just in the beginning. So the guy said, you know, I'm just by myself now, but I actually want to get others, and I want to have team blogging on that. So he was definitely starting here with a goal to move out there. And in another case, it was explicit decision made that they wanted to have one person blogging, and they actually wanted to, in a sense, exploit this kind of connection of like personal voice with particular product. But they decided, actually, as a group, they decided that it should be one person who would blog about that. So it's actually someone who like meant to stay there. So there are all kind of issues in the connection between those and those. So like what happens if one person happened to be member of a product group weblog and also write individual weblog and also write about the same product? So there are all those choices. Where do you blog? Do you cross-post and so on? And in some cases, people just say, you know, I just blog in my own weblog. And obviously, then the product space kind of suffers a bit from that. And also in one case, we talked with a team where there is strong individual blogger kind of affiliated with a product. And then they said, no, we actually want to create group weblog so we can make life easier for him so he doesn't have to speak for the whole group. And we also can make it easier for us so we can be kind of more formal and, you know, don't be in this informal domain. Another interesting thing of product weblogs that they definitely have bigger readership because people, in many cases, come to product weblog because they're not interested in what, you know, someone in particular has to say. They're interested in the news and insights about the product. They probably have more impact in terms of like if you see like how they linked in a weblog world and so on. They also have more risks because they're on the edge. From one side, they're kind of official communication, so in many cases they don't have this usual disclaimer like what I say here, it's my own opinion and not Microsoft. So they kind of official voice, but also official informal voice. So it's sometimes very difficult to find out the boundary there. So what happens, what we find out that I think in all group weblogs that we talked, like that we actually had, you know, some discussions, maybe there are other scenarios, there is some editorial workflow behind. So it's not like I wake up, I decide to post something, and I post, and it's out there. So what we find out that in some cases there is distribution lists where they run, you know, like questions and like drafts of posts. In some cases there is like SharePoint queue with also like approval when it has to go by someone and they kind of list of posts. In one case, the group has actually weekly meetings to discuss, you know, what goes on the weblog and so on. So, like editorial-wise, in some cases, like in one case, it's just person checking with the manager if it's okay to blog about the topic, not really the content as such. In other case, they run through distribution lists the only potentially controversial issues. So if they're sure, they kind of blog them. In another case, they like everything goes to be checked by at least 2 people, and probably in the most kind of complicated case, they have to run it through distribution list with marketing people on it, and they also had like funny saying that marketing people actually asked them not to blog things on Friday, because then they had to deal with that over the weekend, and of course they're people as well, and they want to have weekends. So. And of course, which leads to all kinds of issues. The first thing is that there are delays because there is this editorial. And And it's also more difficult to get team members involved because it's shared responsibility and it's like not clear who should do what, and you kind of think that someone else would do. And also because you cannot like write it immediately, or because you're being edited, it's kind of less engaging. And also one person said that it was even more painful to be edited and discussed internally than externally. So that it's actually very difficult for a blog, which you kind of want to be like expression of yourself and your passions, to actually go through this editorial of your peers.
Question.
Yeah.
Did anyone kind of look at it and express that, in essence, that they're now, it's not so much blogging in the classical sense as just another alternative form of web publishing, and so that they've evolved essentially into their own web publishing group, as opposed because in some respects there's a more rigorous process described in the editorial workflows than there exists today in getting content on TechNet. So there's probably a higher quality bar on controversial topics or on authoritative topics than I know exists in content that sits out as authoritative content.
I guess it's something really in between kind of existing publishing mode and blogging, because there is some kind of editorial and some kind of official position from one side. From another side, it's still in most cases it's faster than usual publishing process. Still, it was only one team where they said explicitly that they had marketing people in the loop. In other teams, they just say, we kind of can get over. And I think in all cases, they still pretty informal in a kind of tone that they have. So it's not the type of text that you have in a press release.
One thing that is interesting about this is it sounds like that there's, maybe you can correct me on this, is that it sounds as though there's one or two people who are the mouthpiece, and that then the rest of the group is sort of like editing them, etc. Or is it a shared responsibility among the group to generate posts, etc.? I mean, I would think that probably you're going to wind up with a couple of people that are particularly good at generating these things, and they're going to get more and more and more of the responsibility for that.
I would say there are different models. We didn't talk, like with all teams, we didn't talk with like several people to really have objective picture. There are definitely people, I mean, I've seen Weblog where they have a lot of different people contributing. I've seen, like in one case, person say that, if like I would stop blogging in a group blog, it will disappear.
But in some cases, they emphasize that they feel it's important for each person who contributes to have their name attached to that post, which both gives them an incentive, which gives people an incentive to post, and actually does lead to multiple people posting. So it doesn't necessarily follow. And that was emphasized as something that they felt was important to maintain the human face and that level of content.
And I could see that would be particularly bad with the editorial then, because this person's name is associated with it, but yet it's being modified by this board that's...
I mean, I don't think that editorial is that much of editorial.
It's just,
It's probably more like checking. It's probably not like really editor, like really, like cutting and pasting your text.
But you can imagine it going different ways.
I mean, I can imagine different things. I mean, there's copy editing, which is one thing, but then there's content editing, which is a little different. And most people, I think, are more sensitive to the content editing than to the copy editing.
Unfortunately, we didn't go into that level of details, but definitely what someone say that it's much, in particular team where they have team weblog running and then a number of people contribute in there, he said that it's much easier than writing personal weblog, because you don't have this pressure that you have to write like every day or every week, because it kind of doesn't, it's like funny if you have weblog which is not updated for 2 months. But in a team weblog, if you have enough team members, it's kind of okay if you contribute every 2 months. So it creates this pretty good space for people who would like to contribute and would like to be blogging, but they not ready to commit enough to kind of do it on their own.
So one of the things that I'm concluding from this is that there are group blogs, but there isn't a single model that's emerged as the model.
No.
There's a bunch of different models that people are trying that involve light editorial, strong editorial, heavy workflow, light workflow, single, kind of this the
Designated blogger
alpha,
group.
the alpha dog driven one versus the communal.
Yeah. And what I actually also suspect that most of these teams, they don't know how other teams are doing that. So I suspect that they're not learning much from each other in that respect. What's a good way to do things?
Right.
Which,
Was there a desire?
There are key points that you want to get to.
yeah. There is, I'm kind of getting there. I'm going very quick through this slide. This is blogging. Blogging is not only in Redmond in English and kind of located on servers here. So there are teams blogging in other countries, and this is kind of a comparison. Blogging is definitely bigger in Redmond and in US. Like it just kind of proportions of people who blog kind of divided by country and like general Microsoft FTE numbers. But they definitely have specific local issues about connecting with local customers, languages, and they also say they want to show also local face of Microsoft. Especially like with French guys, they say, like it's perceived as like big American company, and we want to show that there are local people working for it as well. It's actually kind of coming to the conclusion more or less, but I still have to run through it a bit faster than I expected. So, talking about technologies around blogging, what are the issues around? So, blog reading, a lot of people use Bloglines, which is web-based blog reader, which definitely indicates that people want to be able to read weblogs in different settings in different computers, and they kind of like this flexibility. There are those issues of accessing and reading internal weblogs, which are definitely big things. And a lot of people, they would like to have some Outlook integration so they could read weblogs in Outlook, which is, by the way, there are external products, but you have to find them or to buy them, and there is internal product, which is still in a beta stage. There are some people who look in the blog statistics, and it's not that well supported yet, that you can look, how many people looked at your stuff and kind of fine-tune your style. As I said, for a lot of people, email complements blogging as well. So as a tool to communicate or to notify people. And there are all kind of questions of integration with SharePoint, OneNote, like internal blogs, other tools to kind of support editorial workflow for teams and also for individuals as well to have ideas and drafts that they're not ready to blog yet but want to. These are difficult issues. As I say, the blogging is somewhere space in between personal passions and things that you want to feel like doing. And from another side, if you blog for work-related reasons, it's connected to business needs and company. So there are a lot of choices and questions that arise there. The first one is how much you should blog about personal things. And there is a whole range of people. Like in some cases, you can see really personal details on MSD and weblogs, like really, really very personal stuff. In other cases, people say, no, it's like work and that's it. So it's like the whole spectrum of choices that people make. The same regarding spending work hours on blogging. Some people say, I do it at work hours, and it's work-related, and it's fine. And extreme case there, someone got blogging as part of job description and spends 15 hours a week blogging, paid, so which is pretty amazing. But a lot of people, they just do it at their free time, or they say explicitly, I don't want to do it at work time because I want to keep it separated, that it's like extra, it's not part of my work. And the same related to blogging and commitments. Some people say it's part of my commitments, so I really write there and traffic will increase 2 times. Others, they want to avoid that and they say I don't want blogging to be there. And quite some people say, I bring blogging in as part of my evaluation, but I don't want to be in a commitment because it's a mean to an end. It's not like how many posts I want to have, but it's, like blogging is a way to, get feedback from customers, and then they measure it on that, and then blogging just comes as, like one activity that contributed to that. This issue that we discussed, when product gets associated with name of individual blogger, and there is kind of brand value in a sense where, like customers come to the weblog to learn about the product, and the person kind of gets this extra weight on them feeling responsible for the product. Another thing that some people, they start to feel responsible for the whole company. So they kind of blog, they get recognized, and they feel that they have to react. And of course, there is risk there. They sometimes they can cross the line and go into work that like PR and marketing people are supposed to do, and they're not necessarily trained in how to do that. So there is definitely a bit of risk over there. And I've talked quite a few people. They start feeling that now I'm kind of official representation of like specific product or specific group, so like I have to react and kind of let the world know, what do we think about that. And there is definitely issue of content ownership. So for those people who do not blog as part of their commitment and who do it at their free time, and who have disclaimer that I work for Microsoft, but Microsoft is not responsible, do they own the content of their weblog? Is it different if it's hosted outside or if it's hosted on Microsoft servers? So, and this is very gray area because from one side some say like my contract, all intellectual property is by Microsoft. In another case, they say it's like really, like my free time and, and I kind of do it out of passion. And at the end, if Microsoft wants to also own those blog posts where I write about my personal stuff, because it's kind of funny. So there is this area which is not well defined. And there's some more questions and answers because those are issues that potentially have a lot of risks or kind of unresolved. And those are choices that a lot of bloggers have to make. So talking about kind of implications, so like really more conclusion side, there is opinion or kind of, when I came to Microsoft and then you start to talk to bloggers, the first thing you see is weblogs on MSDN and TechNet, and they kind of talked most about. But there is much more to blogging at Microsoft. It has much more different shapes and variations, and there are also a lot of people who blog about personal things who are also Microsoft employees and who, under certain circumstances, could impact, for example, their impression or communications that Microsoft has. There are definitely questions that related to how far weblog integrated in a company and how work is organized, how much people are aware of what blogging is, what are the risks and potential implications, what are the good practices for blogging. As I say, for product blogging, it's kind of emergent models where there is not clear what's a good way to do that. And I guess it would emerge within like next few months. Questions about access rights, because some people say that I would like to be able to have different, like public, Microsoft, my team only access rights for different stuff that I publish. The whole question with metrics, because there is a lot of risk of once it's clear that that weblogs become useful for business, then of course you want to put them in the commitment, into business goals and so on. And then the question, how do you evaluate that? Because the easiest way to evaluate, like traffic, number of posts published, but they don't really evaluate the things that you want to evaluate. So you really have to find a way how to be smart with that. And the whole question with decision making and also ownership of support. As I said, like internal weblogs, there are a lot of them, but they're not supported in a company. Also external weblogs, they supported basically out of groups which are very externally customer-oriented, and they're not really interested to kind of cater for the blogging needs of other groups. So it's a question, if blogging could move and be supported like widely as part of infrastructure like email, and like what would it take for blogging to move there and be supported from kind of general funding resources. The more weblogs are there, the more questions are there about visibility and syndication and finding information by topic. And there are also discussions among bloggers how, for example, on MSDN server, how people could find, like weblogs on specific topic and so on. And it's kind of technology challenge and opportunity. And a lot of things related to the infrastructure. So potentially what could be done, like really lowering threshold to enter and to start, to experiment with blogging and to have like stable, technology that works so people can actually work with it, experiment, and find what are the values and kind of find what are the good practices around blogging. Things related to RSS reading integration, because now it's like too much work to go and find RSS reader and install. It will be there in Windows Vista, but still take a bit of time. And things related to access rights and multilingual support, so these are more like technology things. And that was the last slide. That was... it was much longer than I expected. Any questions, comments?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are any of the Microsoft weblogs, the product weblogs, localized? Has there ever been an incident where somebody wanted it translated into another language?
I know for some weblogs, there is, in one case, there were specific articles that were translated in a number of languages. In some product weblogs, they link to also, I think, mainly external bloggers who blog about, for example, for Outlook and Exchange, they link to bloggers who blog about Outlook and Exchange in their local languages. But it's not formally, the whole language and localization support is not there. Also,
if these blogs were, in fact, very product-oriented, we could use the same machine translation technology that's being used to translate all of the product support services articles, the knowledge base articles, where we have a disclaimer saying this is machine translated. We don't,
I actually thought about that because we had meeting just.
But we could put you could put a link. We could make it available to bloggers that they know, and they could provide that as a link.
Because I actually thought about that if you find. Because there is definitely language barrier, especially if you talk with kind of local bloggers in other countries, because they say, I want to blog in Russian or French or Portuguese because, this is what people read over there. So, and if you can also make sure that, let's say, high-profile Microsoft bloggers that, or all blogs, they get some tool which can just, you can just feed RSS feed through some translation mechanism. I think that would be really.
We do a pretty good job. Wouldn't put my hand in the fire for a general purpose blog.
For the first
Yeah, but that would be interesting. I don't know. Again, I think the main questions regarding all kind of blogging support at Microsoft is who is kind of problem owner, from which budget this would come. And I guess there are a lot of open questions over there because it's still not really broad company-wide thing.
So was there any study or investigation into kind of listening practices of the bloggers, like which blogs they tend to read, how often they read, how they respond to things that they're reading, how they incorporate others' posts into their own posts, how they get inbound linking to occur? Was there some of that just, is other research, the data's there, but it didn't get into the presentation?
We have a bit of data, statistics about Microsoft people, how many weblogs they read and how. In what topics. So we have high-level picture. There is not that much research in general on weblog reading. There is some which is getting published. There are also general statistics about how many percent of American population reads weblogs. But it's getting there. But talking from a researcher perspective, and this is also something, what this particular topic is something what I do outside Microsoft, it's just very difficult to study. Because it's very difficult to, catch these readers by hand and then to, interrogate them.
thoughts on the use of RSS aggregators? Like, I know that you said that a lot of people are using blog lines, but in terms of adoption across Microsoft?
We have numbers. I don't.
Yeah, we've got that data.
Sure, okay.
We've got the data,
Okay.
definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, I think let's thank Lilia for this. If you have more questions, they can come up now. She'll be only around till tomorrow, so. But you can